So hello everybody and welcome to this interview with Amicable Scientists. Today we have Vania Cao with us, who is a neuroscientist, an author, an experimentalist, a public speaker, and a very important person. She is the founder of Free the PhD, and she loves interacting with youngsters graduating out of academia. Today, we are going to talk to her and learn about her journey into academia, out of academia, and with her startup venture. Joining me on this interview is fellow amicable scientist Chetana, uh, who, like me, is very, very excited and thankful that you made it here with us. And yeah, we'll start with some questions from Chetana.
Yes, for the benefit of our viewers, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your educational background, your PhD, your research, and your journey out of academia.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I always love interacting with fellow academics and academics who are now no longer in academia. I still consider us all to be one big community, and I think the more we talk to each other, the better. So again, my name is Vania Cao, or Vay. I currently work for the Mayo Clinic, so that is kind of my non-academic job at the moment, and I'm actually on our international sales team. So kind of taking us back through my academic experience, I actually majored in microbiology, discovered that I really didn't like that kind of bench work and that level of science. You know, it's really important, but I just didn't want to do it. So when I was discovering, okay, well, maybe, pipetting and running gels isn't the right kind of research endeavor for my interests, I decided to pivot for my PhD into questions that I've always found interesting, which usually revolve around behavior, animal behavior, human behavior. I think behavior is really interesting. And, what governs behavior but the brain? So I ended up in a neuroscience program. It was actually a joint program between the National Institutes of Health and Brown University. So I received my PhD in neuroscience from this joint program and spent most of my PhD years, as well as a brief postdoc in the same PhD lab at the National Institute of Mental Health. So very briefly, my research was looking at how a part of the brain, which is important for motor behavior, motor learning, motor planning, how the cells in that area change as an animal learns a new task or a new motor behavior. So as you can imagine, there's so much that we still have to learn about the brain. And this was a really nice mix of kind of really interesting imaging techniques, pretty challenging experimental preparations, and then a very interesting kind of conclusion that we discovered. So essentially we found that there's a lot of brain cells that kind of turn on when an animal is learning a new task for the first time. And then as they become better and better at the task, you actually see fewer and fewer of those cells appear, but you see many of the same ones kind of come back. So it kind of alludes to the fact that our brain becomes more efficient, maybe uses fewer cells over time, but really starts to define a population of cells to use them for a particular type of behavior or a particular function. So yeah, neuroscience is a fantastic field. I still love it. I consider myself a neuroscientist, even though I may not still be at the bench today. But, as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do after academia, just was pretty sure that I didn't want to stay. A lot of different reasons for that, but part of it is just my personality. I really like people, and I wanted more interactions with people. So I had an opportunity to basically join a startup company still in the neuroscience space. And this became my first job outside of academia.
Nice. Well, once a neuroscientist, always a neuroscientist.
I hope so.
Before we talk about your career outside academia, I wanted to touch briefly upon your experiences within academia that sort of inspired you to look for ventures outside of academia, and B, start a support system for fellow PhDs. So what pain point did you actually want to address, that sort of contributed to your ventures after you graduated?
So I think, honestly, it's just having shared community, right? I think that's a big part of it. I think that I was really looking for a place to share my experiences, share my concerns, and it was a little bit difficult to find a group of people who I felt were knowledgeable, who could tell me what it's like on the other side
Mm.
with honesty. And I think at the end of the day, that's what Free the PhD is all about. We have a lot of mental limitations about what we should and shouldn't do. And Free the PhD was inspired because I wanted to give that resource I didn't find back to the community.
Okay, so talking about what got you through graduate school, tell us about your beauty pageant experience during your PhD and how it has shaped your personality. You're a singer into martial arts and an established neuroscientist. How do you manage to wear so many hats?
Well, I think that's a good question because sometimes people have asked, like, is this something that you learned or is this something that is kind of innate, right? Like something that's just part of your personality. And I think at the end of the day, it's a mix. So the beauty pageant was a local, it's actually an Asian American pageant. And I actually went for the first time because a friend of mine was competing. So I was there to cheer her on. It was the first time I've ever been to one of these events. And, I think a lot of us, if we are kind of raised to be nerds, scientists, I was a tomboy. I was never interested in kind of girly things growing up. And, it was really interesting to watch a performance, essentially, with a bunch of people who have willingly put themselves on a stage in front of a lot of people. And, on one hand, there are some issues with the pageant industry. On the other hand, a lot of people, I think, honestly can say that they have gained a lot of self-confidence and just learned a lot about what it takes to stand in front of an audience and showcase who you are, what you stand for, right? And of course, in a pageant, there are things that you can't control quite as well compared to, say, if you're getting up in front of an audience and talking about your science. But it's kind of, there are some aspects of your science you can't control either. And a lot of it at the end of the day is how you choose to present what you have, right? And how you choose to engage with your audience. So basically, I went to support my friend, and then, she had encouraged me. She's like, oh, you should check this out. Like, maybe you'd like to try it too. And of course, I mean, I was in my last year of my PhD, and definitely one of the older contestants, I'm not going to lie, because I think they had a 10-year age range where you could enter. Definitely, I was on the older end of that range. But I'm like, you know what? I'm nearing the end of the PhD. I've never done something like this before. And I have a bit of a competitive streak. And I'm like, I feel like I could do this. Never mind that I'd never worn a fancy, pageant gown. I've never worked out to try and, improve my fitness. I just felt like I could try it. So I applied, they accepted me as a contestant and gave it a shot. And honestly, I learned a lot of stuff. So as you'd alluded to, there's more to competing in anything or putting on any type of performance than what you see during that final show, right? There are hours and hours of practice and learning. I was on YouTube all the time trying to dissect the way people were dressing, trying to understand what was kind of best practices in that particular field, just like any kind of other project, right? So, you have to do your literature search, you have to look up old protocols, if you're going to start a new experiment. And it's exactly the same thing. So I was watching YouTube videos of catwalks. I was trying to understand, what style of a pageant gown would be the best fit for my physique. I learned a lot about weightlifting, about healthy eating, because at the end of the day, there's only so much that you can do if you're not willing to branch out of your comfort zone and learn about someone else's world. And I think that was one of my personal gains was I got in really, really good shape. And, that's, health is priceless, especially as a graduate student, right? Especially as someone who's sitting in a lab. I was doing imaging all day, animal behavior is very sedentary, ended up with some physical pain from just not moving. And this pageant really motivated me to go to the gym and get in shape and eat healthy. So that was definitely one big benefit. And then the other benefit was just interacting with different people, you know, like all the other contestants. We went and visited different types of local organizations that were either sponsors or involved in the pageant. So, you know, really got out into the community, again, away from the lab. And then finally, I think as far as self-confidence, like you really have to believe in yourself to kind of get dressed up. You don't feel like yourself at all, but you have to go out there and you have to look confident, act confident, speak confidently. You know, this one was one of those traditional ones where they had multiple outfits you had to wear. There's a dance routine I had to learn, which I'm not a dancer, but had to figure it out. And then they had a Q&A section as well. And I will say that for the Q&A, for only me, they actually asked a very science-specific question, which was like, you know, I still remember the question too. And it was something like, if you had the opportunity to leave science and join the entertainment world, would you do that? That was the Q&A question, no preparation. You know, you get up on the stage, this is one of the last sections of the pageant in front of the crowd, and this is what the person asks you. And you have to answer, right, intelligently, confidently, hopefully, right away. And luckily for me, I think it's a question I've always had an answer to. And I said immediately, yes, like I would start my own science talk show like Bill Nye. And I'm like, that's what I would love to do that. And I'd love to host my own science show. So, you know, I discovered at the end of it, a lot of these performances actually have a lot to do with how you know yourself. How well do you know yourself, right? If I hadn't been thinking about these kinds of things over the course of like my own PhD and like what I wanted to do with myself and what I wanted to contribute to society, I wouldn't have come up with that answer so fast, right? Because like it was a very honest answer, but it was like immediate. I was like, yes, of course I would, because I do this. So, you know, that was a really interesting experience, challenging. It was scary. I compare it to the defense of my thesis, which I feel like was much less scary, right? Because at the end of the day, you are the world's expert on your thesis project. Even your advisors don't know as much as you do about, you know, everything that you accomplished. So even though it's scary, you know, I had to get up in front of our department, give a seminar, go into the room and kind of defend the thesis with, you know, my committee members. But that was kind of easier for me than doing something like this, where you're literally in front of, you know, hundreds of strangers and you're kind of putting yourself out there. And I think this experience has also helped me to become less shy about networking in general, right? So maybe a long answer, but I think it was a really valuable experience.